Hi and welcome to today's episode, which is all about making a trio of tasty treats with Filo pastry. If you've seen the lentil and mushroom pie video that I did, you'll have noticed that the pre-made puff pastry that I put on top didn't puff. So I'd used Just Roll pastry. The manufacturer is General Mills. I wrote to them, explained what had happened, and they said that shouldn't have happened at all, even with a hot filling. So they sent me some coupons to say, to say sorry. So I went and bought a few more packs of pastry. I'm going to use their Filo pastry today. This isn't gluten-free, but there might be gluten-free Filo available. I'm not sure. I'm going to do a whole baked camembert. Then I'm going to do one with mozzarella, tapenade and tomato. And then the third one I'm going to do is like chocolate and walnut. I'm going to do the sweet one last, but I'm going to make some kind of porridge to sort of act as a bit of a binder. So I'm going to get that on now, and then that can cool down as I'm doing everything else. So I'm going to add 2 little scoops of quick cook oats, the 150 ml plant milk, maybe another 60. If I'm in the mood for a sweet treat in the evenings, I'll often make a bowl of porridge with chocolate in it. So I'm kind of using that as the basis for this. So I'm just going to add in a tiny bit of cocoa powder to intensify the chocolate. And then I'm going to add in some Cadbury's hot chocolate powder. So when you're looking at your labels, you've got the ingredients there, and there's no animal products. It does say may contain milk, but that's typically it means the manufacturing plant handles milk as well, so there might be traces of it, but they're not using it in there. 1 teaspoon of the drinking chocolate mix, half a teaspoon of cocoa. Give that a stir, and then I might add the extra milk in. The colour's very pale, so I'm going to add in another half teaspoon of the cocoa, and I think another 1 of the drinking chocolate. I'm going to pop in that final 30 mils of plant milk, so it's had 180 altogether. So just mix that in, and then that can be left to cool down. So that's where it is. It's kind of, it's moving, but it's nice and thick. Take that off the heat. I'm going to make up the filling with the cheese one, because as soon as I open that packet of Filo, it's going to start drying out. So I'm just going to have everything kind of as ready as it can be before attempting to assemble. I've got 250 grams of mashed potato. So that's about 1.5 cups, something like that. Doesn't need to be exact. And I just crush the potatoes skin on with plant milk and vegan butter. So I'm just going to break it down a touch with a fork just to get it a bit softer so I can work it. I'm going to add in a spring onion, scallion, green onion. I'm going to go with 1 to start with because it's quite fat, and then I can always add another one in. So I'm just going to pull off the outer skin, which is a bit thicker and not nice to chew on. It's usually the one that's got the darkest green leaf. So just pull that back. Get underneath it, there's like a membrane, so you need to peel that off. And then take off the end bit, again, just because it's a bit tough. And I think I'm going to split that in half. I'm going to keep that bit on just so it's a bit easier to handle. And slice that really finely. Onions all sliced up, pop that in the bowl. I'm using a mozzarella style block from Nourish. So this is coconut oil based. It's quite a nice one actually. Yeah, it's not as sweet as some of the others that I've tried. This is 100 grams, so I'm just going to chop it into little pieces and see how much I'm going to use. I'm just going to cut it into a few planks, and then I'll chop those into pieces. So I'll do pieces, a couple mils across. Just try and separate the little pieces out so they're not stuck together. Yeah, I'm going to do all of it. I'd cook the potatoes in salted water, so I'm not going to add any more salt because I'm putting tapenade in there, and that is very salty anyway, but feel free to pop some in if you want. Now I'm going to put some black pepper in, a couple grinds, give that a good mix through. If you're familiar with Greggs in the UK, it's like a pastry shop. Although, well, yeah, I mean, they sell pastries, but it's not a patisserie. Definitely not. But they do like a cheese and onion pasty, so that's kind of prompted this. I'm giving that porridge a stir just to help some of the heat escape from it, just so it's nice and cool. I've got a 100-gram bar of dark chocolate. I'm just going to chop that down to small pieces. Am I going to use all of it? Yeah, I think I am. I've left the wrapper on just so I can hold it without getting covered in melted chocolate. And just start breaking that down. All the chocolate's chopped, pop that in the bowl. Of course. Got about 60 grams of walnut halves. I've just had those in the air fryer just to toast them a bit, which makes them extra tasty. Break them with my fingers just as easily. Yes, in fact, I'm just going to break that straight into the bowl. So you want pieces about that big. I've got 35 grams of jumbo oats that I toasted off for a few minutes. Well, about 10 minutes, something like that, just so they get a bit of colour on them. I'm adding that in to bulk it out a little bit, but also give a nice bit of crunch. I'm going to put that in the bowl with the walnuts and chocolate. Give that a bit of a mix. Should have had this idea earlier. I'm going to put in a bit of coffee into the chocolate porridge, just to deepen the chocolate flavour. I'm going to do a teaspoon of granules and I'm going to crush them down in the pestle and mortar. The coffee's not essential, but it really does boost the flavour. It's delicious, but feel free to skip it. I'm just going to smash those down a little bit. So it's a fine powder. I'll stir that into the porridge and then mix the porridge into that, and hopefully it's going to be enough to sort of lightly hold it together, because I don't want to bite into it and then everything fall out. Tip in the coffee, mix that in. And then mix the wet into the dry. That's worked really well. I'm happy because I didn't know if it would. If you've got an especially sweet tooth, you might want to add a bit of sugar in there, but for me, that's fine. And I'm also going to dunk them in something, which is very sweet. So for me, perfect. Got the pastry out of the packet. So I don't want to handle it too much because it'll dry out, but so it's paper thin. I don't know if I'll ever attempt to make my own. It just seems a step too far. I'm going to keep it on a board and keep a wet cloth over the top. Stop it drying out. I've melted 50 grams of vegan butter in the microwave. I'm going to brush that on the pastry. I'll probably need more butter, but I'd rather do it in smaller bits rather than melting loads and then not needing it all. So I'm going to do the camembert first. That's the one I found in the supermarket. It's a Violife La Ronde. So I'm thinking, cut the pastry into squares, put it in the middle, and then gather it up, and then it'll have like a little bow on the top. Maybe 3 layers, maybe 4. Yeah, I might do 2 sheets of pastry cut in half. The outside will be super crunchy, the inside will be slightly softer, and then there'll be lots of bits to then dunk into the camembert. So I'm going to cut these in half. Got 1 sheet separate. I'm going to smear that in butter. And the butter is going to give it some colour and also some crunch. Bring the sides up like that. And then, all right, so it's going to be wrapped a bit more like that than it is like that, just because it's not long enough. Pull another sheet down. Rotate it, so I've got it 90 degrees different than I did the other one, and then build that up again. A bit like wrapping a birthday present, I suppose. And then the last one, I might actually try doing like that. Yeah, make a kind of square. Pop it in the middle, and then we'll see if we can bring it up and make it kind of ornamental on top. It is very fragile, so just be, you know, a little bit gentle with it. Like that. Pop it on the sheet that I'm going to bake it on. Paint the outside in more butter, just so that every bit of it's going to get golden and lovely. I'm going to sprinkle on some sesame seeds. Onto the potato oniony cheesy ones. I'm going to add about 30 grams of toasted flaked almonds into the mixture, just for a bit of extra crunch in the middle. So I'm cutting a sheet in half lengthways, the other half back under the towel. Brush that with butter. I'm going to do these into little triangles, a bit like a samosa. I've not actually made samosas, so I'm not 100% sure on how to do it. We'll find a way. I've got it kind of in a triangle shape. For the tomato, I'm just going to use tomato puree, so it's got really intense tomato flavour. I just didn't want to put fresh tomatoes in case it got very liquid. That's the black olive tapenade. I'll stick a link to the recipe so you can make some yourself. It's very delicious. Scatter that over and then try and roll it. There we go. Neat triangle. Those 4 parcels are done. I just need to put the butter and the sesame seeds on. I'm going to start preheating the oven. The packet says 160 degrees C in a fan oven, so that's what I'm going to do. If you don't have a fan, do it at 180. Paint them with melted butter. Tap down any edges that look a bit loose. I'm going to flip them over. Sprinkle on a few sesame seeds. You could use sunflower seeds as well. Anything you like. Chopped nuts, that would be really tasty. And I'm doing one at a time, just in case the butter sinks in too quickly and then it doesn't stick. Might not be necessary, but... So the chocolate and walnut filling has gone a bit firm, so I'm just going to break it down a tiny bit, just so that it's not quite as difficult to move around. Still trying to decide what shape to do them. I think I'll do them in little rolls, a bit like a spring roll that you get from the Chinese. I think they're called cigarettes, I want to say. So I'm going to cut a sheet in half, put the other half straight back under, and then cut that into 3. Try one, see how it goes. I need to make them slightly bigger, but we'll see. Put the other 2 back under. I did another 25 grams of melted butter, but just, you know, it doesn't have to be precise, just use as much as you need. When I do the edit, I'll have a Google and see if there's anything I can find. If you want like a butter-free option, see if there's anything else that will get it to crisp up and golden. And I'm going to get a spoonful. And then sort of shape it on the pastry a little bit into a bit of a tube shape. Once I've got it on its side, and then kind of just patting it a little bit, just to get it a bit flatter, and then get those sides, and then roll the pastry back, creating a bit of a, I guess like a hem, if you're a dressmaker, just for neatness, not essential though. So the ends neatly tucked in. I've ended it up with 9 of the chocolate and nut ones, so I'm just going to butter and seed those. A few little seeds, why not, for prettiness. So that's all of the little pastries wrapped and fiddled with and decorated beautifully, sort of. I'm going to stick these in the oven. I'm going to do this one on the upper shelf and that one underneath it, and then I can always pull that up. Set the timer for 15 minutes and then we'll see how it's looking. I had the pastry in for about 22 minutes, something like that. It wasn't quite brown enough at 15 minutes. There's been a major incident. So the chocolate ones, they look okay, except it has split, but then the cheese, we've suffered a loss. Man down. Yeah, so I've just got a big pool of cheese everywhere. And then the potato, cheese and onion ones, they've all kind of burst as well. So not the beautiful, pretty, neat, tidy little things that I'd hoped for. But I've had my temper tantrum, I've had a word with myself, and now let's just eat it. It's going to taste fantastic. What I think's happened on these 2 especially, vegan cheese has got a lot of water in it, so it's kind of water, starches and oil. And I think once it's got above a certain temperature, it's liquefied, and then that's dissolved the pastry. I guess it's with normal cheese, dairy cheese, there's more oil, more fat I should say. So yeah, it's just burst. And then on these ones, I guess I only did 1 layer of pastry in some of those, so it's just, yeah, it's gone a bit brittle. There's the camembert. It's been sitting on the side so it's cooled down, so it's not quite dripping as much. And it's a shame because that would have been really pretty, you know, to kind of crank it open and then all that cheese would have spilled out. So it's very crunchy. Tear off a bit of the filo and then dunk that into the cheese, the remaining cheese. Now I did smear some off the worktop after I'd spilled it everywhere, and it tastes amazing, so I'll definitely be buying that again. The La Ronde, very tasty, very camembert-like. So use a little bit of that. So that's the texture on it. So it's very soft, but then once it cools down, it firms up a bit. Yeah, it's really tasty. If you wanted to serve it whole like that, maybe put it in like a little foil nest. Get a square of foil and scrunch the sides up so it tucks around the camembert, and then that'll stop it leaking. And then once it's kind of cool, a little bit cool, you can then take it out and serve it. Or just serve it in the foil if you're not bothered. The little booklet that it came with had breading as a coating. So perhaps that would give you more of a thicker binding thing on the outside so it wouldn't splurge out. Onto the potato and cheese ones. So I mean, they look very tasty, if a little bit messy. I think I'm gonna have to get a fork. Perhaps it would have worked if I'd folded the sheets over instead of cutting them in half. Maybe if I'd have folded them lengthways so that it would have been like 2 layers being wrapped up in, that might have protected it a bit more. So I'll show you that. There's lots of yumminess going on in there. You've got the potato and then the spring onions, tomato and tapenade. Have a go on that. Now that's a little pie. Yeah, that's divine. Loads of gorgeous flavours in there, but they're all kind of working together. If I'd had them in, I would have used sun-dried tomatoes instead of the tomato puree, but still delicious. I think that would work really nice as a pie. So you could maybe get like a square cake tin, a bit like you do the Greek feta and spinach one. I want to say spanakopita. So maybe, you know, in a like a rectangular dish, just build it in layers. I think that would be incredible. And then finish off with a little dessert. Pick the neatest, tidiest one. That just looks great. Bite into it. Yeah, that's yummy, but not sickly. Because there's very little sugar in there. There's a bit of sugar in the hot chocolate mix and then a bit of sugar in the dark chocolate. But other than that, so it's not overwhelmingly sweet. I'm gonna pop a bit of this onto one of the chocolate ones, give it a try. This is a praline cream that I made for the chocolate porter cake. I will link everything in the description for you. And it's made with hazelnuts, almonds, and then just sugar. You caramelize the nuts and make it a praline and then blitz everything up. And it's very sweet, but very toasty and nutty and delicious. Pop a bit on and shove it in my mouth. Putting the cream on was a genius idea, because that's filthy. There's loads of great textures going on in there. It's nice and soft. Then you got some crunch from the nuts, bit of crunch from the Filo. In terms of avoiding the burstage, maybe double wrapping them. So do one layer and then wrap it again. That might work. Or you could avoid using Filo and go for like a puff pastry, and then you've got kind of little pasty things, or like an empanada. For these ones, I did only use a fairly small rectangle, so you know, it was only wrapped once or maybe twice. So yeah, maybe use a whole length of the pastry, and then it won't split like that. You know, so you've got sort of 3 or 4 layers around it. And the cheese, as I mentioned, maybe pop some foil on the bottom. What you could also do with the cheese is cut it into pieces, so maybe 8, even 10 little wedges, and then individually wrap each wedge. So it's got a good amount of pastry, you know, good 3 or 4 layers on each side, and then bake them individually, and then just pop them in your mouth whole. And that will solve the bursting problem, I think. For more tasty treats that tickle your fancy, hit subscribe, tap the bell icon, and have a look at this one.